What's going on? Welcome back. Every great brand that you love, whether it's Pixar, Patagonia, Netflix, all has something that you can't quite name. It's not their logo, it's not their strategy, it's not their marketing. It's something invisible. It's something that is moving and guiding people beyond rules, programs, or benefits. And it's this chemistry and this culture. And it's something that I spent over a decade learning, building teams, leading teams, rebuilding teams post crazy pandemics, and how those teams have flourished or declined based on this thing that is chemistry and culture. And the reality is the difference between good teams and great teams is usually not the talent, it's the culture, a winning, high-performing culture that gets the best results from the people involved when they're connected by these invisible forces, which we'll talk about, that lead to great outcomes that they're sharing in together. There's something about this kind of team dynamic and culture that is the unfair advantage for brands that are thriving. And if you're leading people or building a brand that eventually will lead people, or maybe you're leading contractors, whatever it may be, if you're leading and building a brand, you will be thinking about culture, because culture happens regardless. It's not something that happens by accident. You are creating a culture no matter what you do. The question is, what kind of culture and chemistry are you creating? Because you know what it's like when it's missing. It's the meetings that drain energy. It's the types of conversations that don't feel like collaboration. They feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill. It's the idea that people are doing work, but they're not really caring anymore. There's this avoidance of conflict. Everybody has a sense of what has been called artificial harmony. They don't feel safe to share their mind. They'll gossip in other places, but they won't speak the truth when they're in meetings that really require truth telling. And they're scared to be punished or retaliated against, or you don't feel a sense of value in yourself when you sacrifice. There's these things that happen that we all know are what it's like when culture and chemistry is missing. And this is not a talent problem. This doesn't have to do with the quality of people on your team that you're leading. This has to do with the culture and the types of chemistry you've created or fostered, or have not fostered, because you've just been going after things, not thinking about culture. You've just been thinking about delivering a product, creating a product, building a brand, but you haven't thought about the culture that delivers on the promise. Because here's the thing about holistic branding. When you pull it apart and you look at all the ingredients and elements of a brand, culture is that thing that takes your company and says, this is how we deliver on the promise that we're making with our marketing. Because it's like Zappos, the culture of delivering happiness. These kinds of things shaped how this company showed up and how this brand delivered on its promise. When they would send flowers to people, they're a shoe company. They would send flowers to customers that they heard in the customer service conversation had lost a loved one and they needed shoes for something. They would send flowers to that person. That has nothing to do with the ROI of shoes, marketing, and branding, but has everything to do with the culture and how the staff members were empowered in that culture to deliver on the promise. They weren't controlled, but they were empowered. And those are two different things. And that requires leadership. So when trust breaks down and people stop believing in the promise anymore, or when the mission gets lost in noise, the truth is here that your team's behavior isn't your team's fault. This is hard to hear for leaders. It is not your team's fault. It is your fault. You have abdicated the leadership of your team and you've run away doing X, Y, or Z, being busy. And you could have all the right answers for that. You could say you're fundraising. You can say you're trying to sell deals. You can say you're trying to close deals. Whatever it may be, when you neglect the team and you neglect the culture and the chemistry of that team, you actually start to hollow out and lose the soul of your brand in a way. And people start fading. The retention starts going low. People turn over. They don't want to be a part of something like that. They find that they're just a cog in the machine and they're missing something deeper. And that's because the leader has abdicated their role, and their teams. Say for example, it's even like the results aren't what you want. They're not at the quality you want. People aren't creating at the level of expertise or excellence you want them to be creating at. And you're frustrated that they're not doing that. And you're thinking they're not doing their job. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I want to go back again to what I said just a few minutes ago, which is it is your responsibility as a leader to get clear about outcomes and the values that govern behavior towards those outcomes. You don't need to control the behavior. You need to govern the values that then lead people to those outcomes. So if there's an outcome you're not liking on your team, you need to look back to see, is there an absence of a value that you need in place to help govern your team towards that outcome that just isn't there? And I've experienced this myself. I've been frustrated when work isn't at the level I want it to be. And I'm realizing there is a value, a place where it's speed over quality at times that it unintentionally got created. It got created because my urgency at times, over time, repeated, created a culture and an invisible energy that made people think about this is the highest and most important thing, speed, and not thinking about it, taking your time, and excellence. So I think when we look at this as leaders, we need to really look at ourselves, because this is the accountability we have to hold to ourselves. Is, are we actually intentionally creating the culture where people can thrive in, and the outcomes we're looking for as leaders happen because people understand what a win looks like? Imagine if we're trying to play a game and no one has defined to you what a win looks like. It's aimless and pointless. People don't know how to show up. They don't know how to give their energy. They don't know how to hold on to their energy. They don't know how to think when is the right time to sacrifice or when is the right time to pull back and chill. When you understand what a win looks like, then you can understand the actions you need to get to that win. Then you can reverse engineer those actions and go, what are the values that make those actions happen, versus saying, we're going to mandate actions every single day. What you'll then get is robots. You won't get real people on your team. You won't get people who think critically or creatively. You'll get people who can execute, and top talent isn't drawn to that. That's just a fact. That's why Netflix created their robust document. It's like over like 200 slides or something, called the Culture Deck. And it is a deck that allows you to understand this is how we operate. Seth Godin says it like this: people like us do things like this. So when you're building movements or brands that act like movements, you're going to think about your culture, because it's going to govern the behavior beyond the leader being present. When a culture requires a leader to be present, micromanagement is right there. So then top performers and excellent leaders that are in development don't want to be there, because who wants to be managed? People want to be led. That's a very different thing. People want to be led. They don't want to be managed. So when you're thinking about building this culture, you're not immediately going to, how do I create rules that can micromanage people? What you're trying to do is go, how do I create a culture of trust that allows for us to have real conflict around ideas, not people. We're not attacking people. We're having real conflict. Every team that I've been on over the last 10 years or more than that, that has had healthy conflict, has been a thriving team. Every team that I can point back to that's had artificial harmony, there's no conflict around ideas, people aren't speaking the truth that's needed in that moment, I've seen those teams suffer, and people start to peel off of those teams, myself included. And so you have to address this idea of, what does it look like to build this place of trust where brave people can show up bravely and you can let them speak truth, and it's not going to be retaliated against. It's going to be heard. And this is, again, the leader architects this type of culture. It's not the employees who think this has got to be the culture. They will add, they will participate in this culture. They will even bring values that you as a leader may have not even seen, but they'll say, this is how we behave already, and we want to call it out because it's a great value. I'm not saying the leader is responsible to create every value. What I am saying, though, is the leader is responsible to think about how those values make it from just ideals into true behaviors that lead their team. This is why brands that get this create this engine of high retention. Netflix is incredible at this, and they have top talent wanting to be a part of what they do because great people want to play with great people. Steve Jobs said the same thing. A players want to play with A players. So if you're trying to build one of these enduring brands and you're wanting to think about, how do I get to that level? You have to think about culture. You have to think about the chemistry of your team. And it doesn't just happen. Culture will be created regardless, okay? But healthy culture doesn't happen by accident. you need to do is architect it. You need to look at what are the outcomes and then what are the behaviors that get us to those outcomes. And this is every time you show up in a meeting. How do you as a leader start your team meetings? How do you as a leader show encouragement? How do you as a leader reward risk and not just perfection? How do you as a leader empower people to make decisions without you? And then you get to live with the decisions they made, even if you didn't like them. You create this high-performing accountability where everybody knows what the win is, so everybody's accountable to each other towards that result, and they're pushing hard. And so if there isn't a value that governs that, you're going to miss out on great talent being part of what you're doing, and you're going to lose talent because people want to be on these types of teams. So thinking about how do we create cultures of trust? Well, at the beginning, you have to start with some level of vulnerability. I'm not saying kumbaya vulnerability, but I am saying there has to be some kind of chemistry, lunch, connection. People got to have access to each other, which is why it's really, really hard to have remote culture. I get people are trying to do it. I think it's really hard, darn near impossible. So kudos to the people trying. It's really hard to do. And culture, again, is not the perks. It's not slides in the office. It's not a ping pong table. It's not the perks you get around the company. It is the beliefs and values, the invisible attributes that govern behavior on a team towards an outcome that they've all shared, they're willing to sacrifice for. And that's the other part when we talked about in one of the other videos I made about what makes a movement and how leaders can build a brand that thinks like a movement. You've got to have a vision so appealing, people are willing to sacrifice for it. And when you have the culture in place, it's actually going to do better at times than strategy because the culture will create new ideas. Creativity will flourish in that kind of empowerment. So when we're trying to build this out, the best teams are not afraid of conflict. The best teams thrive and they're fluent in it. They have these vibrant conversations. It doesn't mean they're arguing with each other, but there is this realness around, is that the right idea? Is that the right path? Because they're trying to win. So when they know what a win looks like, they know what they're fighting for, they know what the vision is trying to pull out of them. Because when the vision's in place and the culture has the values, like a value would be we value being doing it right over being right is a value in some of the companies I'm working with or working in have is the value of doing it right versus being right, which means I'm not going to lose an argument, get into an argument about who's right here. I'm going to do what is right and what is necessary and get lost in doing that versus just trying to figure out who is right here. So healthy conflict is necessary. It isn't yelling. It's trust being exchanged. And so that's that base level. So when people feel safe to speak their mind, and here's a great way as a leader, let me pause. Here's a great way as a leader to nurture that, because you might say, people better just do that. No, you as the leader need to nurture it. And a great way to do that is for you to go to a staff member or a team member that you're leading and say to them, is there anything that you're having difficulty saying to me because you're scared on what would happen if you shared it with me? Is there anything you're not saying that you know you need to say, but you're scared to say it because of what you think would happen to you if you said it? That needs to be something you say to your team. You need to welcome their input and not get defensive. You need to work on your empathy as a leader because cultures thrive on empathy and listening to the other person. So, and this is why culture is powerful, is because it allows for health. Like when you see things like healthy conflict take place, you see people be empowered to keep each other accountable. There's values that are governing. The question, say, for example, is there always a value you could have in an organization would be, we always go above and beyond. Now, that doesn't give you a strict rule. And you as a high-performing individual need to balance that freedom and responsibility of knowing what that value is, but then knowing how to execute on it. And you have to be able to make those decisions and live with them and be accountable for those decisions. Because the opposite is this, constant oversight. What top level player wants constant oversight? There is none. So when you're building these brands that are great, the unspoken advantage is this type of chemistry, is this type of culture. So rules tell people what they can't do, but values show them what they should be thinking like, behaving like, and acting like. They guide you. I'll tell people, I'll give you the destination. How you get there, I don't care. You can figure out how to get there. You can have a culture that's highly responsible, which means you don't have to manage time or schedule. Like my team doesn't manage a schedule. This doesn't work for everybody, but there's no strict schedule. I let them manage their schedule, their time off, because I care about results. I care about where we're going and getting there. And if at any moment we feel those results kind of being sacrificed because our freedoms are getting in the way, we're going to have a hard conversation as a team together. And I'm going to receive that feedback too. It's not just them. It's a two-way street. Leadership is not a dictatorship. It is an opportunity for you to serve people and bring them towards an outcome that you guys share, you're willing to sacrifice for. Now, this is kind of the overlooked thing because leaders like compliance. They like the idea of people just do what I say and they do it. They like that feeling. What they don't like, though, is losing people who are quality. What they don't like is competitors taking from them. And what they don't like is honestly just frankly losing. And when cultures get developed elsewhere, talent goes there. They start taking up market share because they're building more momentum internally. They're delivering on their promise better. And you experience this when you see brands that you loved start to fade away and their culture starts to deteriorate. You see toxicity taken and people aren't wanting to be there and the results aren't there. So you want to shape culture with vulnerability, get people talking to each other, and then define values. And a couple exercises to help you define values. You want to look at projects you've done together and say, what were some of those projects we did together that we loved? That when we did them, we all felt amazing about them. Then go, what about those projects made us feel amazing? And keep distilling down till you get a value. Another one would be, what project did we hate doing? And then why did we hate it? What was it about that project that we hated? You'll distill a value there as well. And you keep writing them on the board until you find things that really resonate and guide your behavior already, things that you can witness to and say, that happens because of this story, that happens because of this moment, I remember this, and you see it in other people, because if it's already tangible, then you can point it out and people saying, oh, I love this about this person. We have a culture that always starts with encouragement before we give feedback. Great. I saw it in this person. So you then nurture culture because you don't want compliance. As much as it seems easier, it's a road to death. Honestly, you'll lose the right people on your team and you'll lose passion as a leader. So if this is something that stirred you, something you liked, I want you to subscribe, because on our channel, Anatomy of a Brand, we're going to look at all the elements of what make a thriving brand and the things that are beyond just the marketing, social tactics, but actually the internal parts that make a brand matter from the inside out, like culture and chemistry. And if there's something I missed in this conversation, I want to hear from you. I want to know what works or doesn't work and things you've experienced, because this isn't an exhaustive list, but it's something that's meaningful. So if you have thoughts on what you would want to add to this, throw them in the comments, because I think other people would be interested to hear how you shape chemistry and culture in your brand.